Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Plant Consciousness Commentary. Every time I think about this, every time I'm working on this, I keep thinking if that's the best name for it. But honestly, I can't think of a better name. So if you do have a better name for this, you let me know because, yeah, I'm at a loss for words. I changed it just once, thinking, oh, maybe I'll call it, plant intelligence commentary, and then plant, I don't know. Anyways, we're here today. I actually have 3 papers open because I'm in a stage right now where the papers that I have left for 2000, remember I try to go chronologically to a certain extent. So I have to recheck my 2016, but right now the papers that I have open for 2016 are all a little bit technical. And I'm just, hold on, I have way too much light, and so my camera is not focusing. Anyway, they're a little bit too technical, and therefore it's, I don't know, it'll be, yeah. Anyways, that's what I'm thinking for right now. So I just have them set up in case people are contacting me. That's what happens. So sorry, I start, and then all of a sudden people reach out to me to ask me something, and I have to respond. Okay. All right. Thank you for your patience for that. Okay, so I have 3 papers open, like I said. Let's just go one at a time. So if we don't get to one, we just pretend it doesn't exist, and I'll do it next week. It's that easy. We just do it that easy. Okay, the first one is called The Language of Plants, Where is the Word? Now, obviously, just by hearing that title, it sounds like something that's completely right up our alley. This thing about not focusing is starting to drive me a little bit insane. It's like, focus, camera, focus. I have to check why it's not focusing. Anyway, obviously, this kind of title sounds right up our alley. The problem is that the little that I've skimmed through this is very technical in some aspects. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to jump into it. We're going to do as far as we can go that makes sense relating to the technical. If anything, we'll do the abstract. We'll do some parts of the introduction. We'll see how it goes. And then we'll jump to the conclusion. That's the reason why I opened multiples. Because sometimes, basically, you don't have to read the experimental theory or all of the technical parts to get the gist of what's happening. And in this particular case, since she's talking about the actual chemical signatures being used, I don't think that that's going to give us the real information we're looking for beyond what we're going to find in the abstract and in the conclusion. But just in case, we're going to go through it. Okay. So let me share my paper right now. We have a little, no, actually we don't. We don't have I thought I had a hard stop, but I gave myself plenty of time because we actually have the final day of Kickstart Your Conscious Revolution today, which is so exciting. It's so exciting to complete another 5-day boot camp and to really go through this process with a whole new set of people and people who are also doing it again. And I'm really excited to see where everybody is today. I've also been working on some new things. So my mind is just saturated. And so this is the perfect way to deal with my saturation. All right, let me share my screen so that we can get into it. Where am I? Here it is. Okay. Ta-da! I like that this one includes her photo. So for those of you that are in the United States, I'm so curious about this. Here in Europe, at least in the countries that I know of, people include in their resumes, like their CV, they include their name, their photo, and even their date of birth. When I saw date of birth, I thought, isn't that like illegal? Aren't you like not allowed to ask somebody in the United States how old they are when you do a job interview? I don't know. If you know anything about this, let me know because I'm curious. I could have sworn that you actually couldn't ask somebody how old they were, but I could be wrong. Maybe it's just a taboo that you shouldn't ask. But I guess we'll find out. So if you know anything about that, you let me know because I'm so curious about it. All right, so this particular paper called, again, The Language of Plants, What is the Word? And this is something that I was very curious about because this is a botanical garden, Faculty of Science. So this is in Belgium. This is also cross-pollinated with Kyoto University and then also with the University of Eastern Finland. This paper is from 2016. Like I said, we've reached 2016. I've jumped a little bit recently because we've had some pretty interesting things that have come up a little out of order, but pretty much we're going to be finishing up 2016 relatively quickly, and then we will jump into the next year because the papers that are coming out from 2022 through 2024 even already are so interesting. I'm really looking forward to getting into this. But in between, there are some really great ones also that I've sectioned off. You know that my list keeps getting super, super long. My Google Scholar is just out of control, but that's okay. That's the way I like it. It keeps me on my toes and lets me know what the latest research is. Okay. So let's get into the abstract here and see where it takes us. Okay. Plants emit biogenic volatile organic compounds, BVOCs. So biogenic. I don't know why the biogenic part. Hold on. I want to see if I can find out because that's the first time I've seen somebody, not to say, it's just me who doesn't know. Okay. I've never seen anybody actually add the biogenic part, which just basically means that it's coming from a biological, from a living organism. Most of them just call them VOCs or volatile organic chemicals. I mean, organic compounds. Now they're called BVOCs. All right, we'll see if she just creates some kind of difference between them. Causing transcriptomic, metabolic, and behavioral responses in receiver organisms. Volatiles, basically things that fly in the air, involved in such responses are often called plant language. Arthropods having sensitive chemoreceptors can recognize the language released by plants. And this is something that you've heard us talk about over and over again, right? The fact that plants release a whole series of chemicals, and through these chemicals, other plants as well as other animals can actually register these chemicals and react to them in different ways. And this is something that plants do in a whole host of ways. Honestly, we are some of the ones that react, right? The smell of a rose, freshly cut grass, these are all volatile organic chemicals. The smell of pine in the air, all of that is volatile organic chemicals that are being created. Now, there is a theory that has come out from a whole number of different sources. I can't remember if this was in Susan Simard's book or if this was in other research that I've read. I think probably previous research that I had read about her and some others that were talking specifically around the idea of the fact that plants give off a whole series of chemicals. I think it's also in Biophilic Effect, the book. Anyway, there's a whole series of chemicals that plants produce that scientists don't actually even know right now who benefits from them, in the sense that they're not necessarily benefited by any specific organism that can be recognized from the scientific community other than humans themselves. So it's very possible that there are even some of these different chemical compounds that we're talking about that are produced specifically for humans and for humans to be able to respond. There's a belief that what triggers natural killer cells in our bodies, what triggers some other kinds of healings, could be the plant's response directly to humans and not necessarily something that Kim created for some other organism, and therefore we just benefit from it as a side. And this is a really interesting perspective. I'm going to see if I can find any specific research that looks at that human component, but maybe this one does. We'll find out. Okay. Arthropods having sensitive chemoreceptors can recognize language released by plants. Insect herbivores, pollinators, and natural enemies respond to composition of volatiles from plants with specialized receptors, responding to different types of compounds. In contrast, the mechanism of how plants hear volatiles remained obscured. In a plant-plant communication, several individually emitted compounds are known to prime defense responses in receiver plants with a specific manner according to chemical structure of each volatile compound. Further composition and ratio of volatile compounds in the plant-released plume is important in plant-insect and plant-plant interactions mediated by plant volatiles. And this basically just in official speaks kind of just outlines what it is, like what it is that we're talking about. Sorry, I'm having one of those days where, again, people are like, okay, I'm going to shut my messaging off because this is kind of crazy that I have been home and working and in my office almost all day, and most people haven't contacted me. And now everybody is contacting me, and I feel like I'm not giving you my due, what I'm supposed to. I'm not giving you my attention. So I'm going to give you my attention right now. Okay. So volatile communication from plants to insects, such as pollinators, could be across distances of hundreds of meters, as many of the herbivore-induced VOCs, volatile organic compounds, have rather short atmospheric lifetimes. We suggest that in long-distance communications with plant volatiles, reaction products in the original emitted compound may have additional information value of the distance to emission source together with the original plant emitted compound. This is an interesting concept because what they're saying is that not only does the plant send this compound out, right? They're not sending, so kin do not choose randomly to send it, but instead send it out through the winds. Therefore, let's assume that who they're trying to reach is far off. That means that the compound doesn't just have to give the message, the compound has to give additional information such as location. And this is fascinating. This is really interesting to see because as we start getting into what we can communicate, we know from a more spiritual perspective that plants communicate across distance. I mean, when I teach communication with the plant world here in Damanhur or in physical locations, because that's a course that can only be done in person, we experience and we practice this idea of long distance communication. And I teach various techniques for being able to connect and communicate with a plant that, and specifically in this particular course, a tree that is at a longer distance. And we know that that we can receive this. I've told you stories of when I used to travel and I used to receive messages from Luca, the chestnut tree. But that's a more subtle communication that's going across other mechanisms. This is somebody who's within some kind of physical range. So maybe like myself here, if my windows were open to Gary the silver fir, was probably about what? 50 yards from me right now. And so how could Gary send a message to me? Well, if I wasn't paying attention and if there was lots of other trees around, I would have to know some kind of direction and I would have to have some kind of additional information from just the idea that in order for me to know that when I receive the message, where is Gary? And so we as humans are probably not sensitive right now enough to be able to receive these messages, to be able to decode them in such specific forms. Although I do think that instinctively when we're connected, we know. And that's the reason why sometimes you feel that like you're walking in a forest and you feel called to a very specific spot. I think that in some ways our body does have the receptors to be able to decode this stuff. And it's just a matter of actually kind of reconnecting into that part of ourselves so that we don't do this as an automatism or as some kind of like unconscious movement, but that we move it into some kind of conscious movement. That's my opinion only, totally an opinion. Introduction. Plants are chemical factories. They contain compounds originating from primary as well as from secondary metabolism. Secondary metabolites are defined as plant chemicals with no role yet found in growth, photosynthesis, reproduction, or other primary functions. Basically, secondary means we don't know what the hell you do yet. Primary metabolic processes are relatively well characterized in contrast to the secondary counterparts. Biogenic volatile organic compounds are major secondary metabolites in plants. Major. Plant physiological status, availability of light, and other metabolic processes may affect significantly the distribution, and the emission rates of BVOCs from different parts of plant canopy. An increasing number of secondary metabolites are identified to be today's going to be one of those days where my pronunciation is going to go crap. Signal molecules, antioxidants, or compounds having other ecological functions. Especially, BVOCs are present in everyday life, perfuming the air around us. The typical pine smell that I mentioned before, lemon scent, black pepper spiciness, and eucalyptus smell are some familiar examples of BVOCs from plants. So in the future, when you're thinking about biogenic, volatile organic compounds, one of those words that you just throw away, BVOCs, and you just think about sometimes, recognize that the fact that you actually know what BVOCs are, right? You actually participate or accept and receive these on a regular basis. And look at what they're talking about, right? Pine smell, lemon scent, black pepper, and eucalyptus, essential oils, scents that we use on a regular basis for a whole host of different things. So yes, they're secondary. They don't pertain for the plant to direct function such as growth or photosynthesis, but they obviously have some reason why plants emit this, and that it's specifically why is it that we as human beings feel so connected to those. Major BVOC subgroups are benzenoids, isoprene mono, and sesquiterpenoids. Sesquiterpenoids. Say that 3 times fast. Besides being, I lost my page. Besides being present in plant and animals, they also occur in bacteria and fungi. Volatile organic compounds emitted from plants can be semiochemicals. Greek semeion. Semenion is a mark or a signal. So they're mark or signaling chemicals, representing volatile signals of plants, and they function as mediators in communicating between plants and other organisms and between plants themselves. BVOC biosynthesis depends on the carbon, nitrogen, and sulfur availability, as well as energy from the primary metabolism. This part of the energy from the primary metabolism is important for us to remember, because we tend to think, so as humans, we got to put ourselves into a different mentality when we're thinking about plants. As a human, I know that, I don't know, if I'm going to go jogging, I'm going to carb load, right? I'm going to do a carbo load, I'm going to eat something that's really going to give me a lot of energy, that's going to be a lot of, whatever it is that I might need in that moment in order to be able to go on that run in the way that I'm supposed to, in the way that I can feel good and I have the energy that I need, right? I can go to the supermarket, I can open up my refrigerator, I can get that. Plants don't have that same ability, right? In some plants, depending on where they are, there might be plenty of sunshine, and I know that I can always replenish my energy, and therefore I can let a lot of things out. But in other cases, right, I may have a rainy day like it is today, right? It's raining outside. It's been cloudy for the last 3 days. So we had 2 days of beautiful, gorgeous sun. And now we have 1 day, we have 3 days, excuse me, of cloud cover, so much that my solar powered lights are barely turning on at night. So the solar powered lights can turn off without any problem. But a plant can't just turn off its metabolic functions that way. So what does a plant have to do? A plant has to regulate the amount of energy that they put into the things. So please recognize that when a plant is giving off that beautiful eucalyptus smell, or you have a pine tree and it's just so luscious, there's an energy expenditure there. And so it's important to recognize and appreciate the fact that the plants are doing this and that you are receiving this, because the plants, and try to understand what the messaging is. Is the message for you, or is the message for another organism? Because the plant is putting energy into this. And so this is one of those things that we shouldn't take for granted. We should recognize the fact that plants, in sharing that wonderful scent with us, are giving us a gift, they're giving us a message, they're giving us information that we can use. And we as the receivers should not only feel absolutely worthy to receive it all, but also grateful for that reception, because the plant spent energy that the plant doesn't necessarily know where it's going to come from next in all circumstances. The same authors explain that in the cases, a single reaction to a single enzyme will convert a primary metabolic into a volatile compound, whereas in other cases, multiple steps are required. These biosynthetic pathways are connected via metabolic crosstalk mediated by yet unidentified transport. I always like when they say unidentified. Based on biosynthetic origin, BVOCs include multiple compound classes. Dudareva et al. Classified them into 4 groups. Terpenoids, so is one. Fatty acid derivatives, another one. Phenylpropanoids and benzenoids, which is another pathway, and other amino acid derivatives. So 4. So you'll hear these terpenoids, you'll hear of every once in a while, and also benzenoids. Benzenoids are a lot of the compounds that we think of in our house, like that. When we think about our as many of the houseplants are purifying our air, benzonoids is something that you hear of often in that context, like they're purifying of that. Terpenoids are the largest class of secondary metabolic with many volatile representatives. Phytoxylipin products are better known as green leaf volatiles, another acronym, GLV, green leaf volatiles. They include C6, aldehydes, alcohols, and their esters. GLV compounds are produced, green leaf volatile compounds are produced when leaves are injured or suffer from biotic abiotic stresses. GLVs are released within seconds in response to tissue damage. As they are gaseous and transported via air, they can serve as a rapid within plants communication. Consider that for a second. Within plant. We don't even recognize when we're giving off pheromones or any kind of odor sometimes. I'm just going to leave that one there for you to parse the way however you want. Imagine the fact that plants use that, something that just gets dispersed into the air in order to communicate with themselves. Amazing. Just so amazing. Anyway. Within plant communication, which moves from one plant organ to the other much faster than any plant's internal compound. Finally, they have antifungal properties, delaying fungal growth. Phenylpropanoids and benzonoids are common constituents of floral scents. Recently, several enzymes that catalyze the formation of floral benzonoid volatiles have been identified and characterized. A volatile benzonoid representative is mesyl salicylate. Additionally, phenylpropanoids include, for example, phenolic compounds containing hydroxyl functional group on an aromatic ring. They play several roles in plants, such as defense compounds against insect herbivores and fungi. Phenolic, today you're going to challenge me. Phenolic biosynthesis involves two pathways. Shikimic acid. See why I was saying at the beginning that I queued up 3 papers? Because I'm like, really? Are we going to go through this whole thing? Probably not. Because this is what it's going to be like a lot. Okay, let me just read through this for a second, because I don't think you actually care about the names of the volatile compounds. I think what we're trying to get to is, so all of these, they are released from several species after foliar damage. That was the point. As well as from flowers as attractants for hymenopteran parasitoids of herbivores in behavioral studies. Okay, so compared to many green leaf volatiles or terpenoids, these N-containing compounds, nitrogen-containing compounds, are low in abundance. They show to be useful cues in the orientation of various parasitoids and predatory herbivore enemies. Let's remember that the whole origin of this paper, right, is about understanding where is the word, in the sense that we obviously know, and I think it's pretty well accepted, that volatile organic compounds of any sort are considered a form of language, in the sense that plants can use them to contact other species, as well as to contact both other plants as well as in plants. So from myself to another part of myself. So we know that this is language. What this paper is attempting to discover, understand is, are there specific words? In other words, are specific combinations of these different volatile organic compounds, can they be read as we would use as a sentence? And the reason that this is important is because if we can show that plants use very specific combinations of volatile organic compounds, and we start to decipher the words. Now, let me just say that this is a double-edged sword. So bear with me for a second while I go through this thinking. This is my belief, only my belief. Nobody else's belief. Well, I don't know. Somebody else might believe the same thing too, but I'm just saying that this is not me quoting from anything. This is me telling you what I think. So there are 2 prongs to this. One prong that can be detrimental to the discussion around the intelligence of plants, and a second prong that could be actually really interesting. The detrimental part to the intelligence of plants could be that the scientific community recognizes some of these languages and still, so in other words, when they see this combination, they believe it means this message. So this combination of volatile organic compounds means run to, I don't know, a deer. This over here means to a wasp, hey, come a little closer, I want to see you. This over here means to the other side of me, hey, close up my leaves because there's this bug that's coming around, and this bug might actually create some harm for you. So what happens is that the scientific community, some parts of the scientific community being a little bit narrow in their scope, would say this and just think it's an automatism. Like, in other words, it's a habituation. It's something that I just do because the plant kind of has, I'm having this experience and then I produce this chemical. That's the possible negative side effect. But this is where my hope is going, and this is what I think is going to be discovered based on my own personal relationship with plants, okay, and everything I know. What I find that could be the really interesting perspective is that instead, let's just say in all those common scenarios, they do see that, right? It's kind of like when a human being sees another human being, it's very common for them to say, how are you? But once a plant then starts to take those codified messages, codified seems to be the word I'm using for the last week. It's like my word of the week. Once they take those specific phrases, let's say, and they start mixing them up, where individual and unique situations allow the plants to take those language elements and mix them into different things, now we have something that shows intelligence and decision making. And I think that that's going to be the aha moment. So I'm curious, because this paper is, like I said, from 2015, 2016, I'm very curious as to whether or not this has been shown afterwards. Like if this paper, which I'm assuming it does from the way that it's written, is going to show that there are these components that make up the words, in a sense, language that plants are using in this particular codified way, the same as we have words that mean specific things. Will we start seeing additional papers, or are there additional studies, if the scientists are brave enough to do it, where we take things that are in an order that we don't understand, and when we start to really put them together, we can decipher complex language that is created on the spot for that given situation, not just something that is like that because that's what plants always do. This is where I'm hoping that it's going, and that's the reason why I wanted to bring this paper to you, not for all of the details. So let me go through some of the other detail-y stuff so that I can get there. Because again, as I said, when I started this paper has a lot of really technical terms in it, and I don't think that that's extremely important. If you're interested in all the really technical terms, as always, when I publish this, I publish a link to where you can get the actual paper. As BVOC induction occurs by abiotic and biotic stresses, this may occur by human, animal, or nature-induced ways, such as wounding, vegetation, fires, and light temperature fluctuations. Herbivore-induced BVOCs occur due to feeding or, for example, insect oviposition. Additionally, cut-induced flowers cut-induced, such as mowing the grass, will also prime plumes of BVOCs released in the air. So here are the plant language components. This is the part that I'm interested in. The term plant language, or talking trees, is used to describe plant signaling to neighboring plants. For example, elevated levels of phenolics and tannins in intact trees are observed when nearby trees were suffering mechanical leaf damage. The plant language is also considered to cover all communication with plants and other organisms. The BVOCs-based communication of talking plants is more understandable when the receiver is an animal with wide variety chemosensors in their olfactory organs, such as antennae in insects. But plants were, hold that on, considered to be deaf based on the fact that no animal-like chemosensor structures for volatile signal perceptions has been described. Bañuelas et al. Focused on terpenoids as plant language because they are easily induced and emitted in response to abiotic and biotic stress factors. And because terpenoids, from from the most diverse group of BVOCs, so biogenic volatile organic compounds. In their interpretation, each 5 carbon isoprene units of terpenoids form a syllable. And the sequential combination of these units in various volatile monoterpene and sesquiterpene, so 15, wow, compounds form a word. In this analogy, diverse terpenoid blends in the volatile plume emitted by a plant forms the message, and the dialects of plant language come from the qualitative and quantitative characteristics of terpene composition in different plant species. Maybe she's going to get here. I'm so curious as to whether or not this dialect changes. When does how big is a dialect? So is a dialect connected to one kind of species? Is a dialect regional between various plants that are all of different species, but in one geographical area? I am so curious about this. Indeed, Carbon and al. Found that within a plant species, individuals of the same chemotype communicated more effectively and experienced less herbivory than individuals of differing chemotypes, suggesting that plants may distinguish relatives from strangers. Now, this is 2016, 2015, probably when the studies were done. Today, we actually know that plants can recognize the strangers from relatives. Plants that come from the same gene pool can recognize themselves. So this is interesting that this is just another way of looking at it. Galliano and Grimonprez pointed out that the language of plants may also involve visual signals as gestures to complement the information transmitted by sense. And the specific chemical compound may have evolved to pass different information in different geographical areas. This was the question I was saying before. I have a feeling that the dialect is geographical, which would make sense, right? Because an area has to be able to communicate within itself in order to ensure its safety and its continued growth and how they move through it, right? Whether that is the combination of animals and plants, right? All of them have to be able to communicate in a way. It doesn't make sense if it wouldn't make sense. And that's the same as dialects work in human language, right? Human language dialects are based so that a regional area can communicate with themselves faster and more rapidly by truncating the language, excuse me, by putting in shortcuts that allow for an easier communication and also to create a uniqueness that gives you an identity in this way. This is interesting because I wonder if there are kind of different dialects for geographical areas. Is there an implication? Could it be interpreted that plants then have more identity? The reason I say this is because lately I've been reading a lot of literature that is connected to vegetality. And there is this this is a bigger discussion for another time, to be honest, but I'm going to get into a little bit of it, which is something I'm exploring right now. Is vegetality is almost thought of as the absence of self, because it was thought of, there's elements of this that were thought by Daniel Chamovitz, who wrote the book, What a Plant Knows. And in Chamovitz's work, because he doesn't believe that plants are actually aware and intelligent from the perspective of a consciousness perspective, he does believe plants are creative creative is not even the right word, but are aware and are able to react. But he doesn't necessarily think that there's a thought process and a real decision making behind that reaction, like the way that we as humans do, right? It's assumed that because we don't understand the plant mind, plants don't have a visual component to their mind. They don't see things in a certain way, the way we would as human beings, and the way that we've created this rich internal experience that it's thought through, that because we don't communicate directly with plants, so we don't know this, we assume that they don't have it. The interesting thing about this is that this leads to the belief system that vegetality is an absence of self, which, let me be clear, on the one side, as a person who obviously spends a lot of times with plants and really communicating with plants, there is an element of this that I also feel is true. There is an absence of that duality, of that individualism, of that complete individuation all the time, that we as humans kind of turn on, have always unless you're a really experienced meditator, you probably have turned on all the time, right? It's almost hard for you to experience anything not through the lens of self. And so this belief that vegetality is beingness in the sense of complete absence of self, I actually don't think that that's true. I don't think, just like I said, think that we as humans are capable of turning off self, and not just in a meditative experience. I do think that we can reach levels of consciousness, and that we will reach levels of consciousness where I can turn self off and I can enter into a beingness that is in a different level. But for the same value, if you go and you look at it, and if you're inside of Blooming Sprouts and you have Reconnect with the Plant Kingdom, my course, you'll see that I refer to a really awesome article in Aeon magazine that talks about plants as individuals and interrelated beings. There's a whole module on being individual and interrelated. So this is something I've been thinking about for a long time. And so I actually think that plants, the difference between humans and plants, this is again, only my opinion, is that plants can turn it on and off in a much more granular way than we as humans. I think plants can be in that state of I am ecosystem, I am planet, right? I am nature. But I also think that they can say I am self. And I think we as humans, in our disconnection to nature, in our stepping out of being, of really feeling our naturedness, our plantness, our animalness, our rockness, our bacterianness, all of these things that, in my opinion, are present within us. But I feel like in stepping out of that, we then assume that because we are out of it more than we're in it, nobody else can actually be in it. Like, sorry, excuse me. Everybody else, like plants, for example, are always in it. Because since we only have like on-off switch that's so extreme, we assume that they only have an on and off switch that's so extreme and always in the opposite side. I think that that's doing a disservice to plants who are, of course, again, we humans in our kind of present form, 200,000 years old, maybe a little more when you think about, let's even say we're 20 or 30,000 years old as an evolution of a type of species, of a continuous evolution of a species. Plants are 470 million years old. I think they've had a little bit of time to evolve past certain things. And if we really think about rocks, who we assume as inert, there's a lot more evolution in there too. So I'm starting to kind of think that we've got this, well, there's a lot of things we've got all wrong, but I think that this begs more consideration. And I think that the only way that we actually can consider it, and this is the reason why science would probably struggle with it, is that the only way to consider it is from a different perspective that you can't do a scientific method test on. It comes from a spiritual approach that could be scientifically motivated. I was just recording some podcast episodes today, and I was talking about the way that we hear Damenher analyze dreams. It is something that is both very subtle because it's dream, but when it's done at scale, the interpretation of dreams then becomes very analytical in nature, and it gives us a lot of information that can be scientifically shown when we're doing it at mass scale, when you have a lot of input coming in. And I think that in this case, we could use many of the spiritual approaches and many of the subtle communications that we as humans instinctively feel, and as we become more, our plant reawakening goes farther and farther, we could enter into these relationships in a way that's completely different. And we could probably quantify this with enough data, but we're just not there yet. So it kind of seems a little woo, and it seems a little weird. And since we naturally, as sprouts in the naturally conscious community, are both weird and woo, it's right up our alley. Not a problem. So anyways, that was a very long roundabout way of saying this. But so of the fact that I do think plants have dialects in geographical area. All right, release of the VOC signals from plant. Proton transfer reaction time of flight, mass spectrometry has opened a new high-resolution possibility for online measurement of rapid changes in plant volatile emission rates. Okay, so here's another area that I'm probably going to skip over because, as I've said time and time again now in this recording and in this commentary, is the fact that there is going to be some extremely technical aspects to this entire paper, and those are really not as important for like exactly which are the chemicals that the plants are using. We want to catch the really important overall mechanism. So give me a chance to let me go through this really quickly and see where it is. So this is talking about the actual chemicals that are being rapidly produced when plants have, for example, mechanical damage. So, you know, you've cut a plant leaf or something like that. You've pulled a leaf off of a tree or something like that. So let me go between Okay, so the order of C6 compound emissions after larval feeding activity may explain at least partially why Cotessia vestalis, a parasitoid of Plutella xylostella, prefers landing on damaged brassica leaf tissue and first actively analyze the extension of damage, although the host larvae are available on the same leaf. It is likely that emissions, okay, so these are again all of the compounds and the fact that the plants are putting out compounds that are specifically calling specific, in this case, parasites or that are going to work. Okay. What just happened here? Indicate the most. Okay, sorry. I'm still reading. On the other hand, continuous 24-hour mechanical damage on plant leaves with a mechanical mechworm is sufficient to induce similar compositions. So this is again just saying that no matter who's doing it, the plants are actually they're calling in these. So remember that the object of what we're trying to do in this paper is try to understand what is the actual language? What is the word? What is it composed of? What are the syllables? What are the words? What is the mechanism in which the plant constructs the sentence that says something to some other organism? Okay. Pinto et al. And Bland et al. Found that in conditions of elevated tropospheric ozone, the atmospheric concentrations of many of the herbivore-induced BVOCs, so biogenic volatile organic compounds, rapidly decreased, and some compounds even disappeared. It is very, and I think I did it here. If I didn't, I know for sure I read it. A really interesting paper that was talking about distances and at what point do plants recognize, I'm going to summarize this badly, but basically at what point do the plants have to change their composition because the distances are too far? And also, how do atmospheric conditions relate to the transmission? And this was fascinating from the perspective that it's hard for us to believe it, like to understand it. We don't think about it because it's not obviously our perspective, but it is if you make sense. If I'm standing here and I want to talk to somebody who's, I don't know, I have a pasture, a beautiful pasture in front of me. So if there's somebody standing in the middle of the pasture and it's a beautiful sunny day, there's like nothing in the air or whatever, I can speak at one volume. But if it's pouring down rain and I'm trying to get a message to that same person, I obviously have to change the way that I communicate. Either I yell louder, and potentially that might not even be enough. I might add gesture to it in order to make sure that the person first sees me, concentrates on me, and then when they concentrate on me, I can yell or mouth the words in a certain way that the person can then reach to me. Plants actually kind of do the same thing. They have to take in atmospheric conditions to better understand how should they communicate with whomever it is that they're trying to get a message to based on what's happening in the air. So, and that could be much more subtle than it is for us, right? Which way is the wind blowing? How much moisture is there in the air? Are there other chemical signatures present? All of this has to be analyzed and understood in order for the plant to successfully get the message to exactly who the plant is trying to get a message to. And these are little tiny subtle things that we don't really think about. We don't take that into consideration. So it's just something for us to think about. Okay. The atmospheric concentration of many herbivore-induced BVOCs rapidly decreased and some compounds even disappeared. It's well known that BVOCs have different atmospheric lifetime due to their reactivity with ozone, hydroxyl radicals, and nitrate radicals. Particularly, the number of double bonds affects their reactivity. Among key BVOC-grown newts to act as plant signals, GLVs, so green leaf volatiles, and some monoterpenes have slightly longer life than sequisterpenes. But there's a huge variability in standardization of oxygen, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, nitrous oxide, I'm assuming. I don't know, maybe concentration, life cycles, blah, blah, blah. Okay, these are all those details that I was telling you about. Let's keep going. Yeah, we're not going to get there. In the analysis of herbivore insect location behavior, Bruce et al. Suggests the ratio of volatile compounds in host plants' emitted odor plumes is essential for flying insects to be able to locate their host plant, right? So in order for the behavior, the location information, they think it's the ratio of the compounds that is giving location information. But regardless of how it's happening, the fact that there is location information is fascinating. Not just is a plant communicating what they're doing, but the plant's telling you where they are, what they need. So I'm telling you, who am I? Where am I? And what do I need from you? And I'm sending it in a direction to ensure that it gets to who needs to get to it. Come on. Why are we still having arguments about intelligence in plants? Why are we still having arguments about consciousness? I mean, come on. Seriously. Electroantennogram measurements. I would love, I have to admit that it would be kind of fun to be able to have a job where these words just roll off your tongue and you use them all the time. Have shown that receptors in herbivorous insect antennae may have strong response if the ratio compounds in the odor is typical for this host. When the same compounds in different ratios were offered, the attraction was switched off. This means that flying insects are capable of locating their host plants on the basis of olfactory signals. Fascinating. Although the same ubiquitous compounds are emitted by various plants in the environment. That's what I was saying. Who am I? Not just where am I, but who am I? This is a reason I'm actually so excited about doing this Dumb and Her Mystery School that I'm going to be offering. I promise I will have the information for all of you very, very soon. We're working on the final little touches for this next school, the school year one that will start in the summertime. And I am so excited about this because in addition to all of the school program, we're going to be doing our NCC magic. In other words, we're going to have a group session and people are going to have the opportunity to have both group integration session as well as one-on-one work with me. And in this group integration session, I am so looking forward to bringing the plants into this discussion because just think about this. The whole mystery school is around who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose, right? And who better to help us understand this than plants, to help us look at it through different eyes, or different experiences. Look at how plants are using odor in order to create the language of who am I? So what if we were to start thinking like a plant and start to look at who am I based on everything that we're going to learn inside of mystery school about our personalities and our past lives and ancient civilizations, and we reconstruct and reawaken our inner senses in order to be able to understand how to better define who am I based on my microlines. And I'm so excited. Okay. Although in long-distance communication by biogenic volatile organic compounds, the situation becomes more complicated. Atmospheric oxidants such as ozone, OH, and NO3 radicals may degrade some plants' emitted VOCs at subsequently higher rates than other compounds in the same plume. That's what I was saying, that the atmospheric conditions have to be taken into effect. Like it just has to without doing it. Absolutely, Jill. So Jill talks about in the comments, she made a comment about Vegetalia communicate through all the elementals to each other, divas, wind, birds, animals, senses working together. Exactly. I mean, here we're looking at it from obviously a scientific perspective that is limited. But when we expand out, and this is the reason why I keep saying I feel super privileged to read all of the scientific data based on with my spiritual hat on, you can say, because it expands my ability to better understand this, and they complement each other. There is not I have to choose one over the other. They absolutely complement each other. And the more I understand the science, the more my spirituality starts to come together, and I can see the bigger picture, and I can interact with more confidence. And that's the reason why all of this work really enhances my own personal confidence, my confidence, not just in understanding what's happening, but also in who I am and what I am doing. So absolutely that, we're going to be bringing in different ways, the divas and the wind and all of these other elements in order to bring together, because it is all one entire ecosystem, right? Our physical as well as our subtle ecosystem makes up the entire thing of what we live in. So yes, absolutely. Okay, in long distance communication by BVOCs, the situation becomes complicated, right, as we were talking about. This means that the original ratio of compounds emitted by the host plant do not exist in the longer distances. E.g. 100 or 200 meters from the emitting plant in the ambient air of the industrial era. The same authors suggested that insects may suffer from the loss of reliable plant signals, but the evidence of behavioral tests with parasitoids and predators in ozone-rich atmospheres does not give very strong support to this hypothesis. Pinto et al. Suggested that signal value loss of original plant-emitted VOCs by atmospheric reactions could be compensated with increased number of reaction products of the parent VOCs, and there may also have signaling value for insects. However, recent BVOC analysis and behavioral tests with Brassica nigra flower volatiles and bumblebees at ozone-polluted atmospheres revealed that monoterpenes, anisaldehyde, and alkylbenzene concentrations in floral scent was reduced approximately 20% at 3 meters distance and 30% at 4.5 meter distance from the inflorescence, and the scent attractiveness to pollinator was significantly reduced over a 4.5 meter distance when compared to original scents. What are the breakdown products of BVOCs? In general, atmospheric reactions of biogenic volatile organic compounds are complicated, and ozonolysis reaction products of a compound monoterpene. Okay, we're going to get into, again, all the details that I'm not going to get into. What I want to is, therefore, we propose that some of the breakdown products of plant volatile organic compounds, such as C2 through C6 fragments and C10 monoterpenes or oxidized forms of emitted VOCs, may have signaling value together with their original compound released by plants in long-term communication. Their proportion and ratios to original compound in the volatile organic and the volatile plume could be even indicative odometer for orienting insects. So far, olfactory sensors and parasitoid antennae and their functions are still relatively poorly known, although the importance of herbivore-induced volatiles blend are known to be more important attractants than single compound causing orientation towards herbivore-damaged plants. Some of the breakdown products are less volatile than the original emitted BVOCs, and this change of volatility may cause stickiness, better absorbance on receiver plant surface, and possibly influence at least associational resistance in the neighborhood of emitter plants. Yeah, but I don't have it clear whether or not the plants are compensating for this or not. Lack of known chemosensors and their odor binding proteins in plant limited the understanding of plant-to-plant communication. However, plants can uptake various gaseous compounds, including carbon dioxide and BVOCs through their stomata after taking up BVOCs. Okay, let's see where we get to, because this is getting into the biology of it, which, like I said, is not probably as important. You can always read the paper if you're really interested in this. What I want to get to is their conclusions from that. Hold on a second. monoterpene. I know sometimes you have to jump around. You see all of those like words that are unreadable. It should also be noted that plants are capable of sensing the volatiles emitted by their potential antagonists, such as herbivore insects. Helms et al. Found that when goldenrod plants were exposed to male sex pheromones, all of the gall-inducing fly Eurostat, plant production of defense hormone, jasmonic acid, when it is enhanced in herbivore-damaged plants. However, E. solidaris, sex pheromones did not prime defense response in maize or beans, suggesting that the plants can eavesdrop only on communication between co-evolved herbivores. This is really interesting, right? So I'm only eavesdropping if it's in some ways related to me. If it's not related to me, then I don't actually care. It's a pretty good lesson in life, by the way. Okay, I'm reading. You get good at skimming these things, by the way. Like, it takes a while. So this is just kind of reiterating exactly what we were just talking about, and the fact that plants can recognize what are the different data points that they're at. Remember, this plant is looking for the word, right? So it's going to look at the combination of chemicals to try to understand. Okay, so this is obviously a great deal of progress has been made in understanding the role of mechanisms of bacteria or fungi-specific BVOCs release. Pathogen-induced plant responses include changes in both volatile and non-volatile secondary metabolites. It has been documented that plant pathogen infections after alter BVOCs profiles, making infected plants more attractive to specific vector. This way, transmitted pathogens potentially aid pathogen propagation. Additionally, by altering BVOC production, volatiles influence plant morphology and plant chemistry. I have to say that this whole part of like pathogen induced, like when a plant is quote unquote sick, I'm extremely curious, and I don't have an answer right now, but I'm very curious to kind of lean into this, because I've always wondered, we know the intelligence of plants. We know the plant's ability to fight off disease. We also know that sometimes plants succumb to disease, right? And there's some diseases that seem sort of benign, and yet plants succumb, or overwatering of houseplants. And I have to say that I don't have an answer for this, by the way. I do wonder if we're, again, kind of like the conversation I was having earlier about the idea of the states of self. I wonder what plants can teach us about disease. And this is something that we very briefly touch on in Kickstart Your Conscious Revolution, but because it's not the appropriate setting for the really detailed analysis that I want to do. But I would love to work. I did work with a plant as a plant was dying. It was really not a plant that was dying. It was just a flower that was dying. And I really, at that time, it was very early in my work. And so I only went to a certain level of depth. But I do feel like there's a lot more for me to study in this realm of understanding the process of when does a plant succumb? Like, when does a plant allow for a parasite, or it's not always a parasite, but something that actually ends up killing the plants? And at what point is there choice in the matter? Is there a place where the plant chooses, or does the plant fight to the very end? Like, is there a bigger picture? And there's some aspects of this that I have studied, and you'll find it in Reconnect with the Plant Kingdom in all of the section. I think it's module 2 about death and dying. I think that there's still more, and I would love to, it's work that I want to continue to do, because I have learned so much about the death process from plants, and especially from my own understanding of the continuity of life. So that part of it I have much more clear, and that's really what the death module is about, like death and rebirth, in the sense of the continuity of moving through lifetimes. But I think there is an individual death and dying process that I want to get more into. And it's going to be a scary topic for me. I'll be really honest. It's not an easy topic for me to touch, but I do feel like I'm getting to the place where where I need to dig into this, like just because I think that it's hard for us to understand how plants live pathogens very differently from the way that humans do. So I went into the death process, but not the pathogen process, not the illness process. And I think that that's something that could come a lot more into this. So I'm going to kind of skip through this for a second because I think that this is something that I need to step further into before I can make any commentary in. So let's look at the conclusion and future challenges. We conclude that there is evidence of different kind of chemical words on the volatile communications by plants. In very short range communication, the sea silks, green leaf volatile compounds may have important roles to guide parasitoids to actual feeding sites of herbivores in the plant foliage. GLVs also act in within plant and between plant communication. So within, same plant, between two plants. Reports of volatile plant-to-plant communication indicates rather short, usually not longer than 1 meter distances in signaling. Signal perception in plants is not as sensitive as chemoreceptors by insects. Therefore, that makes sense. Okay, so the receptors that an animal that relies heavily on plants is much more refined than that which the plant. Okay, that makes sense. Therefore, it is obvious that BVOC sensing by plants is more prone to atmospheric disturbances, and BVOC reactions with atmospheric oxidants may lead to even shorter signaling distances. This observation suggests that response and receiver plants needs rather high concentration of signaling compounds, and the atmospheric reaction products of BVOCs might not have signaling value for receiver plants. Reduction in concentration or total loss of herbivore-induced compounds in ozone-rich air does not eliminate BVOC signals for insects and other arthropods. This is supporting our suggestion in this review that a combination of original plant-emitted compounds and the reaction products may have signaling value for orienting insects. Electroantennogram experiments with some known reaction products of known signaling box are needed for testing this hypothesis. Pretty interesting. I really thought that they would be a little bit more direct in the specific compounds, but it does sound like what all of this analysis ended up doing was proving that there is a kind of language. The language contains elements such as who am I, where am I, and what do I need from you, or what can I give you, I guess you could say. And I think that that's already really interesting. I would be super interested to see what research has taken place since then. So I'm going to go and check that out and see if there's anything else, something new that has come in since this paper came out in 2016, because I have a feeling that they continued on. This is too big a group of people of 3 different universities to think that this study's stopped right there. But in the end, I ended up spending the entire time on this. I was convinced that I would be like jumping from here to one of these other papers that I had. I was totally wrong. So I guess we're going to have to do these other papers in another day, the next time we meet. So that's it for today's live plant consciousness commentary. We will see each other next week. Next week, by the way, go check the time because we do have a Plant Wisdom Book Club meeting. So we're going to do our first discussion on the book on natural intelligence by Leon Gorison that we're reading. And so because we're going to be doing that, the timing for our commentary is going to be an hour later. So go and check out. Everything is going to be the events. Don't worry about it. It's all there for you to find. You just go to Events for You and you will find it. And I will be publishing this as soon as it all processes. I'm excited to keep going on this realm. We're a little bit more technical, but we're going to be jumping back and forth between between some more biological papers as well as some papers that then are going to take a step back and are going to go look at things again from a traditional ecological knowledge perspective. I have a whole series queued up in that, and that's really exciting because in the last few years, the combination and the intersection between the intelligence of the natural world and us as elements of nature and traditional ecological knowledge are really intersecting in very interesting and unusual ways. And I'm looking forward to bringing some of that work into this commentary. As always, if there's a paper that you've seen, an article that you've seen, or something that you want me to review here, please send it to me. We publish this, I do this live inside of the Naturally Conscious community in every single Friday. And then I also publish it out to YouTube so you can show others if that might be interested. I encourage you to please go over to my YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button and hit a little like and maybe leave a comment, because when you do that, it encourages others to be able to find it. It helps the algorithms really make it more available for others. And my YouTube is still relatively small because, to be honest, I just started using it when I started doing this. So head over there, even if you, I want you to watch an NCC, but head on over there and hit that like button and hit that subscribe, because that way it helps us reach more and more nature-inspired lovers and nature-conscious people who really have been searching for this type of work. All right, I'm going to go prepare for my final masterclass in Kickstart Your Conscious Revolution. And I look forward to seeing you maybe over there. Maybe over there I'll be seeing you. So if not, I will see you in our next edition. Bye.